welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello and welcome to Turn the Page podcast. I am your host today, Megan, and I'm one of the children's librarians at Syosset, and I have here with me co-hosting.
You go first.
I'm Miss Natalie. I'm also a children's librarian. Hi.
And I'm Stacy Mencher, Reader Services Librarian.
And our special guest today here is
Anna Martino from Nickelodeon Archives.
Hello, we are so thrilled to have you here today. Growing up with Nickelodeon, that network, it meant so much to me. And I grew up with so many of the characters on the TV shows I watched, and I love the animation. It was so great for children, and to grow up with that. It left a lasting impression on me, and I think all of us. We have a great connection to Nickelodeon. So I wanted to ask you about the archives because you are the director, and we have some questions here for you today, and we can't wait to get started. So how did you involve yourself with Nickelodeon in the archives? How did that all come about?
So actually, I used to be a public library librarian.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that was like my background. And then I went to grad school. It took a while for me to get to grad school. And then while in grad school, I realized there are also media archives. And so I focused on that, and then I took a break after I graduated, and I ended up being a school librarian and also doing some ed tech stuff, which actually, kind of got me into the position I am now. So then I decided, okay, I think I need to change, and I want to go back into entertainment and media archives. And so I saw that they were looking for a tape librarian at Nickelodeon. And so I applied, and luckily my boss, Eric Swanborg, liked me. He liked my technical sort of proficiency because I was an ed tech teacher as well. And he thought that I could bring that over to Nickelodeon. And so here I am, going on 6 years.
So were you a fan of Nickelodeon before you came to the archives? Did you watch the programming and?
Oh yeah. So I'm probably going to age myself, but I watched Rugrats when it was airing in the 90s. But when we got cable, I remember when we got cable, but I watched You Can't Do That on Television, which was on the Nickelodeon channel that they aired, in San Diego. And of course, SpongeBob, like everybody knows SpongeBob. It's so funny.
Of course.
And I watch SpongeBob all the time. And so it just sort of, when I saw Nickelodeon, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to go see what happens if I apply. But yeah, like coming in, I was a fan. And of course there was a gap because then, as kids age, after a while, you're like, that's too young, except I'll always watch SpongeBob because it's funny.
SpongeBob's the best. I love SpongeBob too.
We are huge
I will watch
SpongeBob
SpongeBob, but SpongeBob is not my favorite. I started laughing when you said that because I remember when it first was on, when I was in school and friends were watching it, I remember getting into an argument with a friend about how Invader Zim is so much better than SpongeBob. And we had a rivalry for a month.
Nice. See, and then of course Avatar came out, and I was late for Avatar. I watched it after it had aired, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this show is amazing, so amazing. In Legend of Korra. So yeah, and I don't know if you guys watched those two.
I'm super late to that game because I watched Avatar what the pandemic started. That's when I watched it.
Yeah, so good.
So I know Stacy had a question about what were some of the specific duties and roles you had at the archive.
Yeah, what do you do?
So we're pretty active archive. Our assets are pretty active, not, some we get a lot of requests. We work with a lot of current productions and then our various business partners. So consumer products, experience team. And I have my staff, I have five full-timers now as of this year. And then we had a couple of interns this year. So we do everything from handling deliveries of animation source materials. So that can include scripts, things we call lock pictures, anything that was used to create a show. So all those source materials, digital, rigs for characters, scene files, those kinds of things. And then we also handle a lot of sourcing for our teams. So we help with movies. We also help the development team if they're interested in, getting inspired by assets. And then we have a small library on site. So when people were at the studio coming in, they would come in, we check out, show Bibles, especially because there's a lot of support for creators at the studio. So if anyone is interested in pitching and want to have an idea of like how people did it, we have those kinds of reference materials as well. So it's a lot of fun. We do a lot of work, but I think so far my team's pretty happy. I think, yeah, and everything from like digital asset management, so wide variety, never gets old.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. How far does the archive date back? When was the history of the archives? When did it start?
So the collection started in the 90s, but there wasn't really a process. It was more storage, right? So people would box stuff up. They knew maybe one day someone would be interested and then just sort of sent it off to a storage facility. But having, actual processes and standards, like the inkling of it started in 2013, 2014 with they used to be interns and then they were hired as production assistants, Kevin Nowaki and Ryan McFadden. So they started it, especially because we had an exhibit for the 25th anniversary. And so people were wondering, where are all these assets? And they started sort of pulling in and doing an assessment. And then, the execs in charge realized like, oh, maybe we should have something. And so they also helped design the vault space and the archive sort of processing area. And then we also, when we had a renovation a few years ago, they also built a gallery space. So, everybody knew the archives were important, knew they wanted to have a place to showcase everything. And then they brought me on, and so I can sort of establish processes for what we needed to make things accessible and to preserve our history and legacy.
Amazing. I mean, the 90s had some of those are the Nickelodeon that I remember and I grew up with. So just at that time, like that started, that was like really the heyday of like what I remember, like it's everything starting, and then like, just getting better and better from then, like such an amazing time.
Curious, because like I know some archives like lend out material for exhibits or showcase stuff. Like it's coming to mind because like I was thinking how New York Comic Con was this weekend, but I was just curious, like, do you guys do that? Like lend out any material or stuff?
Yeah, so we help because that's like our experience team. So we'll help pull source material for them to use to create those displays. And then we also, there's other team like international marketing experience teams. So a few years ago, they took over the island of Malta. And so they did a scavenger hunt for the kids who were there.
Wow.
So at the end of the scavenger hunt, we had maquettes on display, and then we'll recreate, digital prints because we don't want to send out the original. And so we'll do really high quality prints to put on display there. Recently, there's going to be a new wing at the Smithsonian Museum of American History. And so they're doing a pop culture wing. So we donated some assets there. So you'll see some Dora storyboards and some cells from Cat Dog, and we didn't have anything from Invader Zim, I don't think. I'm trying to remember.
That's what Cat Dog works. I, sing the theme song to my dog just because he's only a dog.
Yeah, so we try to do that. And I know the big dream is to be able to exhibit and have, maybe have a traveling exhibit somewhere. And I've had some calls with other museums, like the Pop Museum in Oklahoma and Tulsa. So hoping we can get that moving, but it takes, at least for the Smithsonian, that took about 3 years to kind of gather, assess, and go all through all the legal requirements that were needed. So yeah, it's a long process.
Wow, it sounds like, a long process, but it sounds like you have a great collection there.
Seen a difference between like the older stuff versus the newer stuff, and like how has the material like changed over time?
Yeah, great question. So, starting in the 90s, right, everything was paper, animation cells. We still had animation cells. And then that's in 2000, there was the switch to more digital focused and, CG and even digital 2D. And so there was a movement away from having pen to paper. And even when I started, there were still some productions whose artists preferred to, concept art on paper still. But that we've really moved away from that to it being mainly digital. So a lot of our assets are digital, but it also makes those assets a lot more complex. I don't know if you've ever looked at Maya files or heard of Maya files. So that's what they use for CG shows to create, a character. So you'll pick your character, but it's basically like a model, and there's a lot of other files reference that it has to reference to create that image. So before, right, you would just do our layers and paint on cells, and so it was a little easier. But now it's like, if you want a scene file, there's layers within that, and then there's rigs within that, and then, so it's just gotten more complex over time. And also with media, right, resolution for things has increased. So backgrounds used to be however many megabytes, and now they're 4K, 8K. So there's a lot of storage considerations that have to happen now as well, in terms of like preserving and archiving, and do we really need everything? So we have to be pretty selective, though I feel like we still take a lot of stuff. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. It's so interesting.
Yeah, that really is, it's so fascinating. So for some of the older materials, like a lot of the hand-drawn animation, what kind of technology are you using, preservation equipment? Is there any safety precautions that have to be made to preserve that older animation?
Luckily for our animation cells, it was on like, it isn't on anything that's super, what is that, volatile, right? So it's like they're on acetate, so it's not the same as nitrate film, where we have to be scared that it's going to explode if, it has to be really separated out. And so what we've been doing, especially for animation cells, like the processes, people are very tight-lipped about what they do. And it's because it's very niche, right? So what we're doing is what we can, also with the amount of resources that I have available. So, we use archival safe boxes and folders. For animation cells, we keep them in temperature controlled buildings. And then we also have a lot of various media that we use. So those also go where in temperature controlled if it needs it. We digitize a lot of assets. So we have high quality scanners, color match that as best we can. And then once we digitize an asset, we put it in our digital asset management system so people can reference it. And then the original will go into more secure and temperature and humidity controlled storage, unless we need it for, say, an exhibit. But that's sort of what we've been doing. And it's as needed basis, just because, when I started, I only had 2 people, me and someone else. As a lot of archives, it's only like 2 people, right, to do everything. So hopefully we can have better strategy to kind of tackle it in a more regular cadence.
Well, how big is the staff at one time that are working in the archives?
Now, in the archives, like in our processing room, usually like 4 people. We can have 4 people in there, but it is a small space too. And we have a little digital lab, we call it, but it's like a little office. And so really only one person at a time can be in there, but everybody has like high quality scanners. So you don't have to sit and wait around to digitize storyboards. Some people are like, just feed it in a machine. But back in the day, there's Post-its and tape, and they would do the process there on the storyboard itself. So you can see how the sequence goes. So it's not as easy as just sort of like batch do it. Because it'll damage the material, and so we're trying to avoid that.
Wow, that's so cool. Like being able to preserve all those storyboards and everything from some of like these like so loved shows. Like, as a fan, I think that's super cool. Like, and speaking of like fans or people that want to come in and see the archives, is there any way for people to come in visit?
Before the pandemic, we had people come in, and you could actually request a tour of the studio. And so we would have tours, and then we have a community services focused team. And so we do a lot with schools and other nonprofit organizations. So my friend Carson, he has a program called The Best Field Trip Ever. So we would have a lot of, elementary school kids come and visit. And then if you work at the studio, of course, like you get permission to have your family come visit and take a tour. So, but now I don't know if they'll roll that out again. We'll see, since there's a lot more considerations with the pandemic happening. So, but that before, yes, you could come visit.
Do you guys have social media accounts to connect with fans? Like if they were just like, oh, like as I like go through like some of the past animated shows, like oh, I really loved I'm still scrolling, like Fairly Odd Parents or the Wild Thornberries. Like people want to like, I don't know, like making TikTok videos of like Nigel Thornberry or something, want to tag you.
Well, we have a social media team, and so they'll request assets from us, and it's at Nick Animation. So they have an Instagram page and also Twitter, and then sometimes they'll hashtag us, hashtag Nick Archives, and so then you can see like whatever you see there, like animatics, there's a bit of a mix of self-service and also my team sourcing those materials. But you can see storyboards there, sort of the animatic and the final cut screeners that they built. And then sometimes pictures of the archive. I wish I would have shown, I wish I was in the archive today, because that would have been my background. People can get a peek. But yeah, so that's where you would find us, is on our various team animation pages. So Nick Animation.
Cool.
That's awesome. How do people go about requesting an item? Do you lend materials out for research? How does that work?
So depending on the type of asset, we have a request tracking form. And so most teams, like if it's a current production that needs an asset for their production to, make a new asset, most people submit it through that form, but also they can just email us. Some people still like to call. So, whatever people are comfortable, we accommodate. As you know, it's all about customer service in our archive and library worlds, right?
And speaking of lending materials out, like we are all like huge SpongeBob fans. So is there any way for fans, or do you ever lend out any SpongeBob drawings?
Because we're really a corporate archive, it's pretty private. So,
Mhm.
The way they would access it is through our social media, and sometimes they'll share some of our assets that way. And then in terms of lending, because it's original and really one of a kind, we don't really lend them out. And I've lost some materials that I have lent out, so I'm kind of a little wary when I do, and that's just sometimes happens. So
Yeah, that's understandable.
Mhm.
So do you have a favorite piece from the archives?
You know what I really love? I really love stop motion, and so SpongeBob has stop motion puppets and some set pieces. And I don't know if you saw the Halloween stop motion special we did with this company called Screen Novelties. So we have the boat. We have a giant boat that's like 8 feet long and 11 feet high, and the puppets. So those are like my favorite pieces, just because they're just so cool, and stop motion is so cool.
Yeah, stop motion is really cool. Oh, and
Yeah.
speaking of like favorite pieces, do you have a favorite Nickelodeon character?
Eliza Thornberry. She's
Oh,
my
I love
favorite.
Eliza.
She's fun.
How about you guys? Do you guys have a favorite?
It's a tough one. There's so many. I feel like probably I want to say Patrick from SpongeBob, because he tries to just go about life, and he tries not to take things too seriously. So, hope to go about that way sometimes, but he's just such a fun character. So he makes me smile. So
Yeah.
probably Patrick.
I don't
Natalie?
know if I have a single favorite.
Yeah, there's
I
so
think
many.
I'm trying to think of like what, I mean, clearly I'm a fan of, Invader Zim, but Gur was my favorite of that. But I really liked, I didn't realize as I'm going through the shows, I didn't realize I was Told by Ginger was a Nickelodeon
Oh.
one. And I liked the whole storyline of that. But I'm also a fan of the Wild Thornberries, but I have to say Debbie's probably my favorite now. It used to be
Nice.
Eliza, but I feel like I resonate more as an adult with Debbie. I'm just like, oh, fine.
Nice.
Wish I could have her style with hair over the
Right,
side.
her like one
Yeah.
eye only
Yeah, just be like
exposed.
really emo.
I just thought that was so cool that she could travel all around like that as a kid and be like from one place to the other. It was like such a great show. Anyone else want to share their favorite character?
I love, of course, I love SpongeBob. But I also love Susie Carmichael.
Yeah,
She's
she's
the voice of
fun.
reason for everything. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rugrats is classic.
Yes.
90s. And I love like Hey Arnold, like all the characters in that.
Yes.
Like there's too many good Nickelodeon characters
There's really good
at a
ones.
time. Like so
This
it's
is so
just
true.
yeah. So what have you learned, Anna, from working in the archives? What has been like your overall experience?
I guess just always be, I don't know. I really love working there. It's kind of my dream job. Like I never thought I would end up working with animation. Like I love cartoons and but it's just like I learn something every day. Like there's always something new, and there's always some new advancement that I haven't, been exposed to. And so just working in the archives, it's like I've learned to be more open to all these different things and all these changes that are happening. And just the fact that productions are they work so hard, and so many people make up this one like 11-minute segment of a show that you're watching, on TV or streaming or whatever. Like how it's so collaborative, and how just to always have this sort of team approach to everything, because it's really not like, I don't know, it's probably more profound than it needs to be, but it's like we're really not alone, like everything is like related and incumbent on everything else, and just to always kind of keep that in mind, and bring kindness to my day. And working in animation, everybody is just so nice and fun. Like, everyone's so kind,
Yeah.
I just want to make everyone happy and put a smile on people's faces. And it shows in like the culture, and it shows in, what we put out. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing what you do. We enjoy, Nickelodeon, the animation, the network so much.
I'm curious because since when you first started working there, were there any shows or specific maybe artists that you were introduced to having working there that you didn't know about or watch before?
I mean, I'm so horrible with names. So it's like I would watch the show and I wouldn't know anyone's names, before I started working there. But I don't know, I'm always there's just too many people because they're really all artists. So it's I guess most recently, because the nice thing about being there too is we have art shows, and so people will sell their pieces. And so even if they're my friend Dana, she does needlepoint, and she was in casting and then was a producer. So everybody also moves through the ranks of the animation world. But I didn't know she did needlepoint. And so now I have an Appa needlepoint in my office that she made. And then, we have up and coming artists like Princess. Oh my gosh, cannot remember her last name, but okay. I'm Appa obsessed because I also bought an Appa piece from her years later because we had an Avatar inspired themed exhibit. But it's just seeing everybody, my friend Colton and Ivy, everybody has their own work. They work on the production, but then they have everything outside of it. So it's now I'm exposed to all these people doing their thing, and I have a lot of pieces and prints in my collection now because I can't not buy anything.
I feel you.
Yeah.
Now I'm just scrolling through the Instagram that you told me about.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so excited to look at that too.
How much time after something airs, episode airs, does that piece become archived?
So we try and archive now. We try and archive as we go. So design assets are usually for current productions that are in-house. So they're pushing their assets in as we go. And then once a show either wraps or delivers, we're having them deliver those types of assets, so scene materials for episodes, 2 weeks after it's sent to what we call delivery and to be put on broadcast. So once everything is locked, we try and get everything 2 weeks after, and then it takes maybe a month for us to get everything where in the proper locations that they need to be in, digital asset wise. So we try and do it. That's the dream. But we're really active, so it's sometimes things kind of have to fall to the side until we can get to it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I am your host, Megan, and I have here with me.
Oh, Natalie.
I'm pointing to you.
Oh.
And Stacy.
And our special guest today, Anna.
Thank you, everybody.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.